seemed to hold its breath. Margaret Collins froze, her eyes narrowing as she watched 3 black girls step gracefully into first class. Seats 1A, 1B, 1C, the most coveted seats on the entire plane. For 20 years, Margaret had ruled this cabin like her personal kingdom, and in that moment, she believed her kingdom had been invaded. She whispered to her colleague, venom slipping through her voice like a serpent. "Those children don't belong here." What Margaret didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that these were no ordinary passengers. They were the daughters of Anthony Carter, the CEO of Skyreach Airways, and before this flight touched the ground, the entire world would know their names. Stay with me until the end of this extraordinary story. And if you're new here, welcome to Inspire Now, where real stories of courage and truth find their voice. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from. It amazes me how far these journeys travel. The morning sun poured golden light across the runways of JFK International Airport. It was supposed to be another ordinary flight, New York to Los Angeles. A crisp October morning, passengers hurried through boarding gates, attendants smiled their practiced smiles, and Margaret Collins adjusted the bun in her blonde hair with military precision. She thought she knew exactly how this day would unfold. She had no idea. Fate had written a script she could never control. For years, Margaret had been the so-called guardian of first class, the keeper of an unspoken code, deciding silently who belonged among the leather seats and champagne flutes, and who did not. Executives in $1,000 suits, of course. Movie stars hiding behind sunglasses? Naturally. But children, black children, traveling alone. Not in her world. When she saw them, her pulse quickened. 3 sisters, identical triplets, no more than 12 or 13. One wore a cream Chanel jacket, another a burgundy Valentino dress, the third a navy Givenchy ensemble. Their style wasn't loud or forced. It was effortless, the kind only true privilege can carry. Their faces, mirrors of each other. Braids, curls, a sleek bun. And their eyes, calm, unflinching, unafraid. "Excuse me," Margaret said sharply, extending her hand. "May I see your boarding passes?" The middle girl, Leah, met her gaze without flinching. "Of course," she said softly, and her voice steady, polished. She handed over 3 first-class passes. Real ones, authentic. Margaret studied them like evidence in a crime scene. Seats 1A, 1B, 1C. Her voice trembled slightly. "Where are your parents?" "They're not traveling with us today," the girl in Chanel replied gently. "Alone. 3 children. In first class." Margaret's blood ran cold. She couldn't accept it. She wouldn't accept it. She clutched their documents and called the gate manager, whispering into the phone, words dripping with prejudice she thought she'd hidden for years. 3 young, urban children claiming first class. "Jim, they're in the premium cabin, Mr. Henderson's section. The Whitman's section. You know what I mean." But the manager's voice was firm. "If their documents are in order, board them. That's policy. No excuses, Margaret." With clenched jaw, Margaret led the girls down the jet bridge. Each step felt like betrayal of the invisible order she had sworn to protect. In her mind, first class wasn't just a section on an airplane. It was a wall. And now, in her eyes, that wall was crumbling. Inside the aircraft, the younger flight attendant Jennifer greeted them warmly. "Welcome aboard! Oh my goodness, you're gorgeous triplets." Her joy was genuine, her kindness effortless. She didn't see a problem. She saw children, passengers, human beings. But Margaret saw something else entirely. And in that moment, she decided she would make them prove they belonged. The girls settled into their seats. Naomi pulled out a leather-bound journal. Leah connected Bo's headphones. Grace opened an advanced math textbook, numbers sprawling across the pages far beyond her age. Every action only deepened Margaret's rage. They were too composed, too perfect, too confident. Children weren't supposed to carry themselves like royalty. And yet, here they were. When Grace asked for orange juice, Margaret brought it in a plastic cup instead of crystal. "Excuse me," Grace said politely. "But in first class, beverages are usually served in glassware." Margaret's smile was paper thin. "Safety regulations for minors," she lied. Naomi raised her head from her journal, voice calm but pointed. "Interesting. The unaccompanied minor in 2B last week had crystal. I remember. He broke it." Margaret's hand tightened around the tray. She retrieved a crystal glass and slammed it down a little too forcefully. Passengers nearby began to notice. Mr. Henderson, a long-time first-class regular, furrowed his brow. He'd known Margaret for years, but this This wasn't the professional woman he thought he knew. By the time the plane pushed back from the gate, whispers filled the cabin. Something was wrong. Everyone could feel it. Margaret returned to the triplets again and again, checking their boarding passes twice, then 3 times, hovering near their seats. Her voice, honeyed but sharp, dripped with condescension. These seats are extremely expensive, girls. Are you sure there hasn't been a mistake? Maybe you were meant for economy? Leah removed her headphones slowly, her eyes steady, her tone calm. No mistake. These are our assigned seats, Naomi added quietly, and cost is not a concern. It was a dismissal, polite but firm, the kind of authority Margaret usually heard only from CEOs, from judges, from people in power. Hearing it from a 12-year-old black girl, it ignited something dark inside her, and what happened over the next few hours would not just end Margaret Collins's career. It would shake an entire industry. The aircraft climbed steadily into the sky, but inside first class, turbulence had already begun. Not the kind that shakes a cabin, the kind that shakes dignity. Margaret leaned close to the girls' row, her shadow falling over them like a storm cloud. "I'll need to check your documents again," she said loudly, making sure every premium passenger could hear. Naomi placed her journal down gently, her patience thinning though her voice remained even. "What kind of discrepancy, ma'am?" "The signatures?" Margaret waved the same forms she'd already examined 3 times. "They look questionable." Grace snapped her math book shut. "Are you accusing us of traveling with forged documents?" The entire cabin fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward Margaret, disbelief etched on their faces. "I'm simply doing my job," she replied. But her voice had shifted, defensive, cornered. "Protecting the integrity of premium travel." "Integrity," Naomi repeated softly, tasting the word. "That's an interesting choice." Mr. Henderson cleared his throat from 2A. "Margaret, these young ladies have been nothing but exemplary. Perhaps we can all just settle into the flight?" Margaret turned on him sharply. "Mr. Henderson, with all due respect, you don't understand the full situation here." Patricia Egan, seated in 3C, spoke with calm authority. "Then enlighten us, Margaret. What exactly is the situation?" The weight of her voice silenced the cabin. Patricia wasn't just another traveler. She was a board member of Skyreach Airways, though traveling incognito. Margaret's face flushed crimson. Her lips opened, closed, then opened again. "The situation is that we have 3 unaccompanied minors in our premium cabin who clearly—" She stopped herself. "But the pause was fatal. Clearly what?" Grace's voice cut through like glass. Passengers leaned forward, holding their breath. Margaret floundered. The truth hung on her tongue, heavy with prejudice she could no longer disguise. "They don't belong here." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Gasps rippled through first class. Phones tilted upward, recording silently. The moment prejudice revealed itself in daylight. Jennifer, the younger attendant, approached, her face pale. "Margaret, maybe you should sit down." "Sit down," Margaret snapped, voice rising. "No, I won't let them win." "Win?" Naomi rose slowly to her feet. She was still shorter than Margaret. But in that moment she towered. "This isn't a competition. We are passengers. We paid for these seats. We belong here." Margaret's mask cracked completely. Her voice hissed through clenched teeth. "Not you. Not like this. It was over." Everyone had heard it. Everyone had seen it. And when the captain's voice broke through the intercom, "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been made aware of a situation in our premium cabin. I'll be stepping out to address it personally." Margaret knew her career was in freefall. The cockpit door opened. Captain Morrison stepped into the cabin, silver hair gleaming under cabin lights, his uniform immaculate, his presence commanding. He walked past Margaret without a glance, straight to 1A, 1B, and 1C. "Miss Carter." "Miss Carter." "And Miss Carter," he said gently, addressing each girl by name. "I want to personally apologize for any discomfort you've experienced. This is not who we are, not what this airline stands for." Naomi looked up, her voice calm but firm. "Thank you, Captain. But it shouldn't have been necessary." "You're right," Morrison agreed. "And I assure you it will never be allowed again." Margaret staggered back. Carter. He'd called them Carter. Her eyes widened. She turned toward David Kim, the chief purser, who now held a tablet in his hand. "You really don't know, do you?" David whispered coldly. "You just harassed the daughters of Anthony Carter, CEO of this airline, the man who owns 62% of Skyreach." The blood drained from Margaret's face. The world tilted beneath her feet. She stumbled to her jump seat as whispers spread like wildfire. Anthony Carter, the Carter girls, heirs to. The descent into Los Angeles began with golden light streaming across the cabin windows. But inside, the air was heavy with something far more lasting than turbulence. Word had already spread among passengers. Margaret Collins, the woman who once believed herself the guardian of first class, had revealed her prejudice in full view of witnesses. And cameras, phones buzzed as Wi-Fi reconnected. Hashtags began to trend. Sky Reach shame. Flying while black. Carter girls. By the time the wheels touched the runway, millions of strangers already knew the outlines of what had happened at 35,000 feet. The triplets packed their belongings with quiet dignity. Naomi slid her journal into her bag, pages filled with observations written in real time. Leah coiled her headphones with care. Grace marked her textbook with a ribbon. To any casual onlooker, they were simply three 12-year-old girls preparing to disembark. But to everyone else in that cabin, they were something larger. Symbols of composure, grace, and defiance against prejudice. The aircraft door opened with a hiss. Captain Morrison stood tall at the exit, saluting the Carter girls as though they were dignitaries. "It has been an honor to fly with you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Naomi tilted her head. "Captain, you said this isn't who Skyreach is, but it happened here, by one of your senior employees. Maybe it's time to ask not who you want to be, but who you've already become." Her words struck him harder than any rebuke. He bowed his head. "You're right, Miss Carter. We have work to do." As the girls stepped into the jet bridge, applause broke out behind them. Passengers clapped, some rising to their feet. Henderson, Patricia Egan, even strangers from economy who had heard whispers of what unfolded. For a moment, the triplets weren't just leaving a plane. They were stepping into history. Back in the galley, Margaret remained hidden, escorted by security. Her uniform felt like a costume now, a relic of authority she no longer possessed. She heard the applause through the curtain. It wasn't for her. It never would be again. Outside the terminal, a crowd had gathered. News cameras, reporters, even airport staff holding up phones. They weren't waiting for Margaret. They were waiting for the Carter girls. Anthony Carter himself was there, tall and imposing in his navy suit. When his daughters reached him, his composure cracked. He embraced each one tightly, his voice trembling. "You handled yourselves with more dignity than this world deserves." Behind him, a black Bentley waited to take them not to a car service, but directly to the family's private jet, already prepped at Van Nuys. Margaret glimpsed the scene from a distance as she was led out the side door. For just a moment, her eyes met Anthony's through the glass. There was no rage in his stare, only disappointment, and that cut deeper than hate. That night, in a Manhattan penthouse, the Carter family gathered around their dinner table. Naomi typed the first draft of a blog post that would go viral by morning. "They told us we didn't belong in first class, but we belong wherever we stand. This isn't just our story. It's the story of countless black travelers who endure quiet humiliations with no cameras watching." Leah played the Steinway piano, notes of sorrow and defiance weaving through the air. Grace studied her math again, grounding herself in certainty numbers could always provide. Anthony Carter watched them, his daughters, his warriors, and vowed the incident would not vanish into headlines. It would become a turning point. Meanwhile, Margaret sat in her Torrance apartment. The glow of her laptop lit her face pale. Video after video replayed her downfall. She heard her own voice dripping with contempt. She saw her face twisted with disdain. The world saw her not as she imagined herself, a professional protecting standards, but as she truly was, a woman undone by her own prejudice. Calls came. Lawsuits followed. Her son Tyler wept on the phone, ashamed to share her name at his university. "Mom, everyone's seen it. How could you?" She tried to explain, to justify, to excuse, but excuses sounded hollow even to her own ears. And then came the Carter family press conference. Anthony stood with his daughters beside him. Journalists packed the St. Regis ballroom, lights flashing, cameras rolling. "What happened to my daughters happens to black travelers every day," Anthony said firmly. "The only difference is, my daughters had power to fight back. Others do not. That ends today." Grace stepped forward. "People call it a bad day. But a bad day doesn't make you question a child's right to sit in a seat. A bad day doesn't make you serve plastic cups instead of crystal. That's not a bad day. That's prejudice. And it has no place here." Her words echoed across headlines. "Prejudice isn't a bad day," Naomi added, her voice steady. We didn't ask for this fight, but when it came to us, we chose to stand. And Leah, with poise far beyond her years, spoke the words that would live on in posters and classrooms. Our grandmother taught us dignity is our birthright. No one can take it unless we surrender it. And we will never surrender. The room erupted in applause. Margaret watched it unfold from her darkened living room. On one screen, her face plastered across memes. On another, the Carter girls praised as heroes. She had tried to make them small. Instead, she had made them giants. Weeks passed. Skyreach introduced sweeping reforms, a zero-tolerance policy, cameras in cabins, free legal aid for passengers who faced discrimination. Other airlines scrambled to follow suit, desperate not to become the next scandal. And Margaret? Her life collapsed with breathtaking speed. Mortgage foreclosed, credit frozen, family fractured. She became a warning whispered in training rooms. "Don't Collins this situation," managers said. A new verb born of her disgrace, but then, a knock at her door. A young black woman with a folder introduced herself. "I'm from the Carter Foundation's Restorative Justice Program. You're being offered a chance. Not forgiveness, not absolution, but accountability." Margaret's hands shook as she read the terms. Counseling, diversity education, community work, standing before crowds and admitting the harm she caused. It was brutal. It was humbling. It was her only path forward. And so broken, she whispered, "I'll do it." Months later, Margaret sat in a community circle in Compton. Around her were others who had harmed and those who had been harmed. Her voice trembled as she finally admitted aloud, "My name is Margaret Collins. I was racist. I harassed 3 children because of their skin, and I destroyed my own life because of it." The room was silent. Then a young woman spoke, one of her past passengers. "You spilled wine on me once, told me to use the economy bathroom. I lost a job interview that day. Your prejudice cost me more than comfort. It cost me opportunity." Margaret broke into tears. Not of self-pity, but of recognition. At last she understood. Meanwhile, the Carter triplets thrived, invited to Congress, featured on Time magazine's cover. Their foundation reshaping aviation law. They were only 13, but they had already changed the skies. And one evening at a gala, Naomi said it best. Margaret Collins thought she could put us in our place. She was right. Our place is here, wherever we choose to stand. The applause rose like thunder. Margaret, sitting in the back as part of her program, lowered her head. She knew she would never undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, by living differently now, she could keep others from repeating her mistakes. The Carter girls had not only claimed their seats in first class, they had claimed their place in history.